This thing starting here very soon.
What's up, everyone? Okay.
And there's Mr. Robnoerr. Glad to have you, my man. Can you hear me?
I could hear you. Oh, help if I unmute myself. Yeah, I could hear you. Thanks for having me,
All
man.
right, perfect. There we go. So, no, you didn't want to talk Hamas. I got, I tell people, I got a little bit of a drive ahead of me, and I wanted to do this little impromptu space. And you said no Hamas, but you did want to talk about Palestinian protesters and students being canceled. Lead us into this, man, because I think this is a great topic of conversation in regards to actually advocating for terrorism, which quantifies as treason versus free speech.
Yeah, so first off, the no Hamas, I'm just getting tired of talking about it every day. It seems like there's, I mean, I'm up for it, but yeah, with this idea of canceling, I thought it was very interesting because, I know that you are someone who says some things that may be found to be offensive from a great many people, and you've been unceremoniously kicked off of huge accounts that you have. I'm always been a smaller streamer, and I always say when I get kicked off, it's not hard to build back up. If you only have 30 people listening, it's not a big deal. So clearly, we both have a soft spot for the dangers of cancel culture and removing people. I think that we have to always sort of default or lean towards the position of allowing unpopular speech. That's totally true. Well, understanding that's different than like what this guy did at Cornell, where he's literally posting like, I'll kill Jews, I'll even more offensive things, if you could believe it, than that, to people of a certain ethnicity he wants. And we have to understand that that sort of thing, I think, is absolutely different. So while I default to thinking that people should be allowed, you should be allowed to stand up and say, I'm criticizing Israel, and it sucks if you're getting canceled just for that. If you're proceeding to say, I'm okay with killing babies because, from the river to the sea, blah, 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 I think that that's more out of bounds. But my overall take on this is even the people I think that are getting caught up that maybe didn't say anything that's a direct support of terrorism that are getting caught up on this, my position is that I feel they shouldn't be censored. I do believe that. But I'm not coming to their defense. I'm not going to speak up for them. I'll speak in general of what the policy should be. But I'm sick and tired of turning the other cheek and having a bunch of people that want to use every weapon possible to lock us down, to silence us, to censor us. And we keep telling them, look, this is immoral on face value, but even if you don't take that tactic, can't you see how this will be used against you in the future? And they say, no, 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 it can't. And then as soon as it's used against them, all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, where are all those free speech right wingers? Sorry, you made your bed, lie in it. So while I disagree with the fact that they may be getting canceled, I'll speak on it when I feel like it. I'll speak to you about it. I'll speak to our Spaces audience about it. But I don't feel obligated to speak up in defense of people that are asking for it that would like nothing more than to censor me from every single platform possible, including college campuses. So, hey, it's not going to change. Cancel culture is not going to change until the people that sought to weaponize it against Christians or against right-wingers or against populists have it used on themselves. So, hey, I'm sorry that they made their bed and now they're lying in it, but that's what happens when you cheer on authoritarianism and stripping our rights under the Bill of Rights.
I think it's interesting because, and I agree with what you say there. It's like, I think the most, uh, in this, I don't even want to broach this, but it is a very, very slippery slow argument. The idea of Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to censure Rashida Tlaib for open support of Palestine. It's like, look, Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of these people, like I've said time and time again, that she does some good things out there. She at least has the cojones to stand up for what she believes in, but she also doesn't understand the very foundations of the Constitution. So she's going out there and saying, I want to censure Rashida Tlaib for her support of Palestine, unless you can prove that Tlaib has directly been involved in trying to actually support Hamas, then that's her right to free speech. And now people are trying to censure Marjorie Taylor Greene for it. It feels like this is a childish gambit to go back and forth. It doesn't feel like anything's going to be accomplished from this. And this is where we have to differentiate between the true freedom of speech versus advocating for terrorism and actually supporting. So when DeSantis went after those groups, actually doing it to get money funded, all that stuff to terrorists, it's like, that's illegal. You're trying to fund the enemies of America. That's treason. That's not free speech. But then there is the free speech absolutist group like myself that's just kind of like, you have the right to say whatever you want to say. Like I've said, I believe you should be able to say bomb on an airplane, but that also means the airplane can, or the airlines can ban you from ever coming back. So it's like I get both sides of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it is difficult. Listen, I hate when people say, like, well, I'm for free speech, but I'm against hate speech. Well, what does that mean? That is why free speech exists in the first place. There's no need to defend popular speech. Like, no one's going to censor people saying, hey, how are you? I hope you have a great day. The reason that the founders were so concerned with the First Amendment, and the reason that it is the First Amendment, is because they themselves lived through a situation where they were accused of having improper or offensive speech when they based on the rulers of the country at that time, the King of England, right? And so they understood even people that wanted to criticize them, even people that wanted to criticize the government, even people that said offensive things against your religion, they should be allowed. That should be protected speech. That doesn't mean you're protected from the consequences of that speech. If I own a small business and you want to come in saying, that, some crazy stuff about whatever religion I have, or you want to say, oh, when I'm at home, I burn the American flag, I could say, see you later. But that's different. That's a different level of, I think what you're talking about is when we have organizations that the government's sending funds to, such as a college campus or a nonprofit organization, who's then actively recruiting for or funding for enemies of the United States, like Hamas, like a terrorist organization. That's completely different. So to put it quite simply, did you see the other day, I think it was Josh Hawley was grilling Mayorkas about one of the people that works at DHS under him, put up pictures the day of October 7th of people like hand gliding with guns on it, and was basically celebrating the terror attack that happened in Israel. And Josh Hawley was asking, like, is this person still employed? Why didn't you fire them? That's different. We are not obligated with our tax dollars to pay for employees that are cheering on terror attacks. Now, as a private citizen, if that person's not working for the government and they want to post that same thing to Twitter, should they be arrested? No. They absolutely have the right to say that. But that doesn't mean that someone who has, basically a military clearance that's operating as a law enforcement mechanism on our border, we should continue to employ when they're literally cheering on terror attacks. Because what do we do if people from Hamas are suddenly coming to our border and we have people in our border patrol that is sympathetic to the terror attacks because it was against the colonizers? So it is a nuanced difference, but I think that when people want to criticize someone like me of being like, well, that's anti-free speech. No. She could say that. That woman could say that. She could cheer on that terrorism. What she can't do is continue to get tax dollars in her efforts to do that. If you're an organization that wants to say we support Hamas, fine. I guess that's fine. But you should no longer get U.S. government tax dollars for any of your endeavors.
Isn't it interesting how closely related this is to those that were, say, for example, canceled, fired, silenced for COVID misinformation, talking about, like, I didn't want to get the vaccine, I didn't want to get this, that, and the other. And people were talking about that, restrictions should happen as a current. It always seems like anytime there's a very unpopular idea, the first thing they want to do is censor. The first thing they want to do is silence you, fire you, ruin your life. But then when the roles are reversed, suddenly it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not constitutional, that's not right. And then you start getting into the weeds on what is actual free speech, and none of them want to admit that. And that's the most ironic part about this whole ordeal for me. And to go back to the person you were talking about, I talked about on the podcast today, that student in Cornell, I believe it was, talked about he wanted to slit Jewish women's throats, rape them, murder the babies. Like, this guy was literally just talking about actual violence. So, I mean, at least the police jumped in at the proper time this time before. And do I think he'd actually do it? I don't know. But again, there is a such thing as protected free speech versus threats of actual violence. And now people are starting to realize that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It is completely different. I find it ironic, though, going back to this point, I do think that the pendulum could swing too far, that we could see, for example, people getting kicked off campuses or things like that because maybe they criticize Israel. Or maybe, let's say, I find this to be a defensible position. Hamas is a terrorist organization. What they did was indefensible, but I think Israel is going too far. Even regardless if I agree with that statement or not, that's different than being like, Israel's colonizers and I support Hamas. Even if they killed women and children, I don't care. There's obviously a difference between those two opinions. So I'm sympathetic that if you're in that first camp and you're on a college campus and all of a sudden now you feel like, oh, there's organizations that are trying to kick me off campus or, trying to get me kicked off social media. I'm sympathetic, except for this. They didn't care when it happened to us. In fact, not only did they not care, It's worse than that. They cheered for it. These people, including people, and I'm not saying this as an ethnic attack, I'm just saying this as because it's important to and germane to this conversation. A lot of Jewish people who are reliably Democrat voters, who have pushed things that the ADL have pushed, who have pushed sort of a progressive agenda and things like Black Lives Matter and calling white people colonizers and things like this, they were more than happy to censor Trump supporters or censor people that had conversations about COVID or censor people that had conversations about Black Lives Matter being terrible. They were more than happy to say, yes, kick them. We're okay that they're being banned off social media. We're okay that these conversations are banned off YouTube or banned off Facebook. And again, if you're just tuning in and you don't know the history of like John, he could tell you if he wants real quick of how many channels he's lost. Not because he's calling for violence or things like that, because there are certain topics that our government approaches social media companies and says, eliminate people, kick people off, censor people that talk about these things. And some of these prolific groups on the left are now suffering the same consequences. Now that all of a sudden they're like, oh boy, now we're being attacked with the conversations that we want to have and we're being canceled. Well, I'm sorry, what did you think was going to happen? And, I was one of these people that in 2018, 2019 was saying, no, the right shouldn't engage in cancel culture. We shouldn't. Don't worry about boycotts. Don't, I would have said back then, don't boycott somewhere like Bud Light. We're better than that. The best argument will win. We don't need to censor our opponents. But the truth is that's not true because our opponents don't care. They will continue to use any tool because by any means necessary is their slogan. And they will never change until they suffer their own consequences that they've wished on us.
I 100% agree. I think the high road is what Republicans have taken far too long. That's why they're spineless. They have no backbone. And then when you start basically punching back at these people, suddenly they pearl clutch, claim to be victims, yada, yada, yada. So, and then you take organizations like the ADL. ADL, I hate to say this, there is a massive, massive anti-Semitism problem on the right. It's been showcased day after day, specifically on Twitter. I've had to unfollow previous friends. It's like, you've gone too far. Like, you are so far off the reservation. There can be discussions of Jewish nepotism in Hollywood, the banks. We can have those conversations. And it's not that I'm accusing them of that. It's like, but I'm willing to sit down and listen to these debates because nepotism knows no race, no ethnicity, no nationality. Nepotism is nepotism is nepotism. But then you have these organizations like the ADL that are Jewish liberals that are trying to take any criticism of the state of Israel and turn that into an accusation of anti-Semitism. And that's what murkies the waters on this. So when somebody says anti-Semite, it's kind of it's akin to saying someone's a racist. It's lost all meaning now because it's been used improperly and out of context for so long. So, I like how you talked about Jews in the past. It's like, it's the, you're right. The chickens have come home to roost. And now it's time for these same organizations that condone for censorship, that wanted a silence. It's time to strike back at them. Because ultimately, the platform owners themselves condone this. Now, do I think this is going to have any kind of like net positive outcome? I don't. You've never seen like a leftist, or at least I haven't, or even just a standard, let's say it's a standard moderate Democrat, specifically in the social media space. I have not seen in any large number a group of them come out and say, you know what, we were wrong. We were wrong for the censorship. We were wrong for, condemning those that were standing for medical autonomy during the vaccine process. None of them. I have not seen en masse people come out and say, hey, we were wrong. So like you say, though, I do believe in saying, you know what? You do have to fight fire with fire. They're going to continue walking all over you. And I will say, how many of these people made themselves perfectly clear during COVID? They wanted us dead. The White House said a winter of severe illness and death. And here we are going into our third one, and they're still pushing these jabs like crazy. But, to go back to the original point, they don't care. You said it yourself. Vosh, I remember him saying, by any means necessary. And so when these Palestinians are getting, Palestinian supporters are getting fired from their jobs, cry me a river. I don't care. If you want to vocalize your position, if you want to make your stance known to the public and your employers and say, I support Palestine, well, then you have to bring in the argument of like, what is Palestine? Palestine is Hamas controlled. So when you say you support Palestine, you better be very clear on that one. I know Candace Owens took that approach. And it's like, I have friends that are pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. What does pro-Palestine mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to like something you just said there that brought up a debate I had recently. I was debating a person that I do often who's on the left, and I was talking about RussiaGate and stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to get in the weeds for everyone listening. Like I do 4-hour rants on this stuff. But I was talking about at the bare minimum, we know that the FBI illegally spied on Trump using a Russian source that was spreading disinformation, and they did that to spy on a president and get wiretaps to spy on his team. And I said, all I want's equal treatment. And this left wing person tried to get me to admit, he said, so you're saying that you want illegal wiretaps against Joe Biden? Now, I'll tell you, John, no, that's not what I want. I clearly don't want that. I want the corruption to stop. But what I told that person is, I don't owe you a damn thing. You don't get to demand of me, you who cheered on this illegality, you who cheered on the corruption. I will not sacrifice my principles because I'm going to cheerlead for one politician or because I'm going to cheerlead for a political party. I know what I stand for and believe in, and I'm not going to sacrifice it just because I want my side to win one short-term victory. However, I'm not going to be held accountable by people themselves who haven't showed contrition for the fact that that's exactly what they did. They cheered for the corruption because Trump was so evil. And make no mistake, they'll cheer for the corruption because DeSantis is so evil, or whoever comes next in line. It won't matter to them. They'll always lather themselves up to the next current opposition is literally Hitler, literally the worst person. It's similar to this cancel culture idea. I could speak to an audience of people I feel are good faith that have always questioned this cancel culture and talked about the importance of the First Amendment. And we can have a nuanced discussion about, well, what does that mean? Do we feel bad for people? We think the pendulum's swinging now to go. That's all well and good. But I'm not going to listen to these students that would have cheered me being kicked off campus if I was giving a speech there. Now all of a sudden lament the fact that the things they're saying are getting them in trouble with potential employers and with their university. Sorry. Go talk to someone who cares, right? You could have stepped up. And what you said about you haven't heard contrition. Did you see this clip the other day from Bill Maher's show where this guy from a professor in NYU or whatever, he came out and was like, look, we tried our best with lockdowns, with locking kids down, and I was wrong. But now it's the time for grace and forgiveness. Like, no.
Yeah, no. To hell with that. There is no. Because, when I view this the same way as I view Trump, and everybody else that were advocated for forced vaccines, forced mandates, forced lockdowns, yada, yada, yada. When the time actually came, when the crunch came, you failed. You failed. You did not stand for liberty. You did not stand for the Constitution. You didn't stand for any of it. So when these same people, and I do remember like about a year ago when the science suddenly started miraculously changing, and then people are like, you know what, now is not the time to finger point. It's time for grace, time for forgiveness. Fuck you. Fuck you and your forgiveness. They advocated for us to be strapped down to gurneys, forcibly injected, have our livelihood destroyed. No, these are the enemies of freedom, not just the enemies of the right. These are the enemies of freedom, excuse me, regardless of which mouth it's coming from. These are not, they're Americans in name only. So to sit there and do this whole, kiss and make up, absolutely, we are so far beyond that. And America is in turmoil right now. People just don't understand or grasp these concepts of true freedom and true liberty. Instead, it's these like gratifying stances they want to take and cherry pick the Constitution, such as the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Anna Paulina Lunas, even on the right. It's like you people are no different from the left in your tactics. And it's like, yeah, you might score a 2-point conversion, but in the overall game, everyone's going to lose. And nobody seems to realize or understand that. But as long as our side can move the ball 5 yards, well, then, hey, that's a victory. But at what cost to our principles?
Yeah, I totally agree. And like to make this like, I remember listening for my job. We had to listen to like, what is the makeup of a good apology? And there was this guy on Oprah's show one time that was passing away, and he gave this, it was called The Last Lecture. But if you think about it this way, if you really wanted to show contrition for believing in cancel culture and pushing it, or lockdowns under the pandemic or whatever like that, what makes a good apology is you don't just say, I'm sorry, but you understand then that you have to have actual contrition. You should have shame. You should understand that people are going to call you out and ask, well, how have you changed? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? You're right that like maybe less than 1% of the people that push this stuff will actually apologize. But those that do, like this guy in Bill Maher show, what he says is he's like, yeah, I'm sorry. Anyways, it's time to let go. It's time to free. That's not an apology. That's someone who's trying to shirk responsibility. And it's funny because of all the videos I saw that went on Twitter, about this guy, what was funny to me was if you listen to him further in that show, there's a clip where he starts talking about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and he calls him David Duke Jr. And Bill Maher's like, well, actually, he's adopted a black son. Now, I'm not saying you have to like Mike Johnson, but the point is, does that sound like a guy that's like, oh, I feel bad that I labeled people racist or bigots or evil under COVID because they were upset that I wanted to lock their children down. And now I realize the error of my ways and I won't make those mistakes again? Of course not. He immediately goes on to do the exact same thing. And make no mistake about it, these pro-Palestine people, even if we don't think they should be censored for the speech that they have, make no mistake about it, if we go to bat for them and we stand up and say this is wrong, like I'm saying here, but I mean physically going to these universities and saying, no, I stand with these people in that they have the right to say it, they would stab us in the back in a heartbeat. They believe that the rules are only for you. That's what, and of course there are people on the right like this, but this is what the pro-establishment, and I think it exhibits itself more on the left, because the left feels that they are morally superior. So they don't care. They think you're an awful person. So they're like, yeah, you deserve all this bad crap. You deserve the FBI showing up at your house. You deserve to be kicked off TikTok and Twitter and Facebook. You guys deserve all that because you're racist bigots. You hate gay people. You hate trans people. You're terrorists. You're redneck hillbillies that cling to your guns and Bibles. That's how they believe. Once the exact same tools used against them, it never even crosses their mind. They look at you as subhuman. So, okay, who cares if you're kicked off? Who cares if you're fired from your job? Who cares if you're locked down? They don't care. But once it's infected on them, they're like, oh my God, this is so inhumane. And by the way, it goes that way with the conflict itself, right? Like, yes, there is a nuanced position to have, and it's one that I happen to share.
I'm going through a, can you still hear me?
Yep. Oh, sorry, was I not talking there? Could you not hear me?
Yeah, I think you self-muted there for a second.
Shit.
I might be going through a bad spot of driving. No, I heard you. You just muted like 5 seconds ago.
Oh, okay.
I agree with you. The moral superiority complex exemplified the left on the daily. It just goes to show that, again, they've been principled. And, you can also push this over to the Israeli-Hamas thing as far as principled fire. There's no such thing. You could sit there and, try and take the high ground or high road like Republicans have done repeatedly for so many times. But I feel like people, the Republican voters primarily, are fed up with it. They're sick and tired of it. They're basically saying, look, from 2016 to 2018, we had a majority. Nothing got done. And we start to kind of look and say, look, it's time that I think Americans woke up. Voters started waking up and realizing these congressional runs are actually more important than the presidential run. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying the presidential run isn't important, but these representatives that start off in the House and things like that, this makes a big difference. And now, again, Biden's calling for more funding to Israel. Johnson's going to support this, and it's like we are funding terrorism, and they call it foreign aid. I had that debate with Professor who talked about, they're going to pay this back. No, they're going to pay back 10 billion or 10 million that's earmarked, but we've given them over 180 billion in foreign aid. That's not coming back. That's taxpayer money. And people say, well, it's military equipment. Who paid for that equipment? That's taxpayer money. And people just don't seem to get this. So every time America goes in there with the best of intent, best of interests, we fuck it up. And right now we are funding both sides. So who's really going to suffer? The American taxpayer. That's what pisses me off about this. So these Republican representatives get up there and they just continuously do the same thing over and over and over again with your money, and they face no repercussions. They're not facing record high inflation. Why? They're cushy. Dude, they go into office making $175,000 a year just to push yes, no, or abstain or not present. That's the problem right there. So again, the left's morality and then the right's inability to actually have some teeth to anything they do. I think the American voters finally on the right are getting fed the hell up with it, as they should be, as they should have been for a long time. But, and I hate to bring Trump into this, as long as the cult of personality is going to revolve around Trumpian politics, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to get done. We have to have unity. We have to have actual constitutionally bound leadership. And I don't see it on the right now.
Well, I don't disagree. I think that there are people, again, I'm certainly going to vote for Trump if he's the nominee. If I had to vote today in the primary, I'd vote for DeSantis, but it's close. But I think that what you're hitting on something that's absolutely true. I saw there's an excellent interview from Theo Vaughn's podcast with Tucker Carlson. I recommend everyone watch it. It's hilarious, and I think that it shows hopefully what John and I show here, which is that people on our side of the issue, we actually have fun. And I think that's what comes through the most with Tucker Carlson when he's on Theo there. But Tucker, echoes exactly what I thought about Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson comes in. Whatever you think of the Israel, Ukraine, the funding, et cetera, look, I'm against it. I'm against all of that funding. But let's say you're for some of it or some limited. Mike Johnson comes in after this big speaker fight, and like it's sort of this question that you seem to be asking there, like, what is the Republican Party? What is it that their constituents want? And I could give you a laundry list of things that Republican voters, of average people are concerned with, whether it be the border, whether it be fentanyl deaths, whether it be the economy. There's so many things in this country, poor veteran care, homelessness, so many things. What's the very first thing Mike Johnson says when he comes in? Yeah, we're giving money to Israel. That won't stop. That's certainly going to happen. Where are his priorities? What are the priorities of the leadership of the Republican Party? Even if you're a Republican voter that says, I agree with that decision, that's the first thing? That's the first thing on their minds? That's the priorities? And I think you see this, like even polls that I saw a poll today, which, I understand polls are garbage 99% at the time. But it said that this poll was trying to make it seem like, well, Republicans support Israel funding and Democrats don't. 56% of Republicans don't want to fund Israel anymore. That's a majority. 56% don't. And that seems to be the leadership of this party, whether it be Trump, whether it be McConnell, whether it be, Mike Johnson now. Where are they? Where are they on these issues? Now, to Trump's credit, I think he hit on something that benefited him greatly in 2016, which was the border. I think that this was a growing concern for tons of people on the left or the right, and the establishment Republican Party thought it was verboten to talk about it. You'd be accused of racism. Their donors that want cheap labor would be upset, so they didn't want people to talk about it. And you saw when Trump stood up and spoke about an issue that actual Americans cared about, how popular that message was. And I think that that's what we're seeing. We spend all of this time focused on Israel, Hamas. And the situations that were put in by our leadership make no sense. Just like with the Russia conflict. I said this at the beginning of Russia-Ukraine. We were not in a position as the West to deal with Russia because we specifically chose through policies to not be energy independent. Therefore, our allies were dependent on energy coming from Russia, but at the same time, we're sanctioning Russia. How does it make sense? The same is true of this Israel-Hamas conflict. We have had open borders for so long, it will be so easy for Hezbollah or Hamas to have lethal attacks in our country. We screwed up. If you want to be the big dog, if you want to be out there saying we're going to kick ass around the world, we're going to fund wars around the world, then you have to make sure that you're secure physically and economically back home. And that's the opposite of what's happening.
Well, it's interesting to me that, to go off of what you're saying as far as energy independence, that as soon as Biden gets elected, we assume buying oil from Iran again. Now, people that are watching the news, yesterday, Yemen declared war against Israel. Yemen is an Iranian-backed country, if you will, who's at war with Saudi Arabia. Their war, the Middle East is one big catastrophe. And my thing is stay out of it. They've been doing this from generation to generation. This is nothing new. But I think it's new on social media because we have not seen something of this magnitude in quite some time. And it gets people's eyes open and they start doing some research. They start looking at some things here and there, and they're dipping their toe in the water of what is the Middle East. But what they're not understanding is this has been going on for such a long time. You cannot fix this. All you can do is back your ally and let them fight it the way they need to fight it. And that's what Israel is going to do. But the energy independence thing, there is so much more at play in this because, again, the first thing Biden does is he makes us no longer energy dependent. We have to buy foreign oil. Why? You can talk about donors. You can talk about we need to keep our reserves for whatever reason. Then the times we're the only one that has oil. That's not necessarily true. In Texas, in Alaska, we have so much oil. I think even Texas alone, we have enough oil that we could power America for 50 years over. That's not including Alaska. That's not including those Bible Belt states. Nothing like that. So again, our politicians, it really feels like, by and large, even you talking about the border, they're not really representing the American voter. That's when it gets into the weeds on super PACs, donors, all this other stuff that needs to be addressed. But our Congress has become so corrupt on all sides that it's all about the money. Money is the driving force behind everything, and ultimately it's voters, everyday voters that are going to be penalized for this. And we talk about Trump did a good job bringing the border to the attention. Absolutely. And again, our spineless Republican Congress did nothing. They fought him on it. I will concede Trump did some good things. Absolutely, he did. But this also goes to the point of proving why congressional representation is paramount. We have to vote in the right people to go out there and say, look, the border is an issue. And I've said this repeatedly. I'll continue to say this, that right now, well, my thing is the border should be the number one priority. But the FBI just talked about, they come out, Ray, who says that, by the way, a terrorist attack on America, it's likely because we have that open southern border. Well, at the same time, and this is the thing I talked about on today's show that people have to be aware of, is the emotional conditioning of these three-letter agencies like this to start getting people hyper-focused on this war in the Middle East. Why? Or the open southern border to, I think, eventually support committal of U.S. forces in Israel to go to war with Palestine, to go to war with Hamas, to eventually be drawn into a proxy conflict with Iran. But they're being emotionally conditioned to support such a thing. But, and I hate to sound like Alex Jones here, but be on the lookout for another terrorist attack, because I really feel like if they want to promote this, they want to get more U.S. involvement. That's gonna be what has to happen. We saw this with George Bush. We've seen this happen repeatedly. And what do people instantly? Because people, the American voters, are very emotional. They sway, and when they sway with this idea of like, look, we got to fight the terrorism over there before it reaches our shores. No, we need to secure our shores. That's the problem right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Listen, I'll sound conspiratorial too. People could call me Alex Jones. I don't care. It's funny to me how many people on the Republican side think that Democrats would affect voting machines to steal an election. I'm not judging those people. I haven't seen proof that that's occurred, but I think that they're right, that if you truly believe... I had this guy in the show. I won't be too worried about this. He calls in, and he's a big Trump hater. And this is right after 2020, like maybe 10 months after the 2020 election. And he calls in, he sounds like a normal guy, and he's just talking, oh, yeah, I had, was out with some friends, ball game, blah, 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 blah. And then I mentioned Trump. He freaks out. Instantly his tone changes. And you could just tell how mad TDS he has. And we start talking about like possible losing chain of custody of ballots, and does that matter? And does people that voted in the wrong district matter? None of it matters. As long as they voted for Biden, none of it matters. And I said, let me just get to brass tacks for you, sir. I said, if you were a poll worker in 2020 and you're working in Arizona or Georgia or Pennsylvania, and you start to think that this guy that you think is the most evil person ever, he's Hitler, he's a racist, and he's going to win, and you're seeing it in your station, you're in one area where if he doesn't do better here, it's over. That Trump's going to win and Biden's going to lose. Would you do something to steal the election? And after a while, he said, yeah, I would. Why, if it's true that so many people think that Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whoever on the opposition is literally Hitler, that's literally going to lock up black people, that's literally going to expel every Muslim from the country, that's literally going to start World War III, what would they not be willing to do to win? And if you're the establishment that has so much to protect, that you've had this control on power in both the Republican and Democratic Party, and there are potential outsiders like Trump or DeSantis coming in, what would you be unwilling to do? I firmly believe that they at the very least were cheering for COVID to ravage this country in 2020 because they knew that would increase their chances of winning the presidency. I thoroughly believe that they actively ignored or supported riots that were occurring all throughout this country because they knew that they would be able to blame the current administration, and therefore they'd be able to say, see how things matter. I thoroughly believe that the FBI intentionally created a kidnapping plot of Gretchen Whitmer so that they could say how dangerous Republicans are right before the election. So seeing as how everyone, even Democrats that are at least somewhat objective, have to admit what a shit show the Biden administration is at this point, do you think it would be beyond them to just intentionally allow something shitty to happen? Now, I don't mean that they would be financing it or planning it necessarily, but they know that they've brought in a bunch of people that they can't vet, that probably have allegiances to Hamas. And do you think that just like with the Whitmer thing, that they might be like, well, we'll let it go too far, and then once it happens, be like, oh my God, look how bad this is. Now we need to come together and support our current administration? I'm sorry. I say this all the time. It's not my fault that I don't trust these institutions like the FBI. It's their fault because they've lied to us and they've been corrupt for so long. So absolutely, I'm not even here to tell you that I think that the Biden administration or any of these institutions are intentionally going to facilitate or allow a terror attack on the United States. But I bet they wouldn't mind it if it meant them entrenching their power even further.
It's been, well, yeah, 100%. Like, I'm not trying to get into the conspiratorial disputes of like 9/11 was an inside job, yada yada yada. Even Israel, the whole thing, the spiel about them allowing that attack to happen to secure more power to retaliate against Gaza. Yeah, that's the thing about Twitter. Everyone and their mom's going to have some type of opinion, some type of hypothetical, some type of conspiracy theory as to the reasoning why. But then when you get down to the weeds of it, there's a lot of issues that come into play. I did watch this interview on the fence line that surrounds Israel, and they showed pictures of it. It's a fence. It's literally a fence. That's it. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I thought it was more than that based upon what people were discussing. And then you start to wake up and realize, okay, well, we're being lied to. People are fabricating things. We're not getting the whole truth. We're getting half truths. And the FBI is no different. I have a few friends that are law enforcement officers, and I have done my best to try and wake them up. And it's like, look, I love you. I respect you. We need police. We 100% need police. But there must come a limitation to the power that they can wield. And that goes double for any three-letter agency that can be created with the intent of protecting the American people. If anything, we saw from, 2014, or let's just say 2015 to 2018, how corrupt the FBI was, but nobody was really seeing how deep it ran until the Trump administration actually proved that the Biden administration spied on them via the FBI. Regardless of which political side you're on, we can all agree that's wrong. And if they will do that, if they will weaponize these agencies for political purposes of, going after the opposing party, do you really not think they would do the exact same thing to you if you are, say, in rebellion of the government? If you're saying this is not right, the government has turned tyrannical, at what point do we concede the government has become tyrannical? But our representatives, they're not doing anything about it. Term limits, nothing. Censorship on social media, nothing. Border securement, nothing. They have done nothing. So I hate to say this, but it's kind of true. We kind of deserve to lose at this point. Republicans, not the voters, but the reason we're losing these elections, we've lost faith. Democrats look at Republicans, and even in the sense of what have you accomplished? What have you done that is proactive, that has prevented something from occurring? We've got nothing to show for it. Now, don't get me wrong, we've been fought on all sides on this. When our representatives are so spineless and we continue to get into the weeds over the cosmetic things that just don't matter, this is just another reflection of what the GOP is right now. And again, that's why I feel like the Trumpian era politics have got to go. We need constitutionally sound representatives that go in there. I love Thomas Massie. I am a massive Massie fan. I love his stances. And what does the ADL do? A Jewish-backed coalition that is trying to use to strengthen American-Israeli bonds. They attack him. They make him akin to the likes of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, saying, well, he doesn't condemn the attack. Yes, he did. But, these bills that are getting passed, all this stuff, it comes with these other very hidden stipulations that if you're not reading, you would never know. Massie goes out there and says, look, this is the reason why I'm not voting in favor of it. And what does he do? Even people on DeSantis' side is like, fuck Thomas Massie. He's the most constitutionally sound representative we have that is actually standing for the American people and, more importantly, their money. But what do? Republicans attack him as well, specifically MAGA people. DC Drano goes after this guy. It's like, you just don't get it. You are shooting us in the foot. We should be encouraging more Massies. We should be encouraging more people out there. It's not all black and white. There's a lot of gray here. But in this gray, you've got to understand the reasoning why they're doing it, and people just don't care. So as long as American voters choose to remain ignorant and see things as, say, for example, one-issue voters, no wonder we keep losing. There is just so much more to be discussed here, but a lot of people don't want to come to the table because we are so wrapped up in, number one, identity politics, cult of personality, and it's just got to the point where I'm losing all faith in voters. I really am.
Well, for me, the lockdowns under COVID, to me, that was such a black pill because I expect big government left-wing socialists. I fully expect them to cheer for big government policies that say, who could congregate where, etc. To me, the fundamental difference between most left-wingers I interact with and most right-wingers comes down to this. Most right-wing people feel that we have these sort of inalienable rights, and at some point, government can temporarily restrict them based on extenuating circumstances. So, there's a hurricane coming, and it's going to kill everyone, and we won't be able to send first responders in. Is there an argument that theoretically you could forcibly, remove people from their home until the hurricane goes? I'm not saying that's the right issue, but those are inbounds. But the government would have to prove, here is the evidence as to why we have to prove that temporarily we restrict some of your rights. The left feels the opposite way. They feel that you have to prove that you deserve the rights. So when it comes to something like lockdowns, they're like, well, prove that you shouldn't be locked down. And that's the fundamental difference, right? And so they'll always default to trusting big government to do whatever they want to you, and you have to prove that you don't deserve it. You get locked up because you were at the January 6th rally, even if you didn't do anything wrong, even if you didn't set foot in the Capitol, well, prove it. Prove that you shouldn't have been. You're guilty until proven innocent. That's how they look at it. For me, then, the big black pill moment was, I was, like, look, when I say this, please don't take it the wrong way. I was volunteering for Trump's campaign in February, March of 2020. I was offered a job by their campaign. Now, this was a small job. It was just basically running his operation in the county. I'd had like 50 people more important than me just in this state alone of Pennsylvania. But I turned down the job because they said that I had to get rid of my social media space, which I was unwilling to do. 3 days later, Trump comes out and he's criticizing governors and people in countries that won't lock down. And I'm just on my channel excoriating him. Like, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? This is going to cost you the election. And I had all these people that were Trump supporters, which I was a Trump supporter. I was volunteering for his campaign, that are just leaving my channel en masse. How dare you criticize Donald Trump? How dare you? You must be a Democrat, they're telling me. Okay, whatever. I start talking to these people. Many of them have told me they're constitutional conservatives. And they're telling me, no, this is why we need to lock down. Just 15 days. 15 days to slow the spread. And for me, that was such a huge black pill moment because I was like, of course the left's going to believe this, but when the people you think are your allies are so misinformed or are so cowardly or are so apathetic that they allow something like this to occur, what chance do we have when the people that should be the most vocal speaking up against this? If you were a Trump supporter, you should have been more vocal than anyone criticizing him for those terrible decisions. Because I could see it a mile away, that it was going to be a train wreck, that it was going to cost him dearly politically, but more importantly, it was going to cost us, the actual people of this country and the people of my state, it was going to cost us dearly. And I agree with you, the fact that that's Trump's biggest weak point, the fact that he hasn't shown contrition for that, the fact that his supporters are unwilling to admit. You could still support him and say that was a huge mistake. I don't know why Trump doesn't just admit it. It's because he needs, that's not Trump's strong suit. He's not the kind of guy that admits when he's wrong. But yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes you just have to look. I mean, John, if you take a step back, if you were in a coma for 300 years and you woke up now, how could you not look at the United States and just laugh at how it's the end of an empire? You have open borders. You're printing trillions of dollars a year. Like, your big debates are like, are there biological differences between men and women? Should we be teaching sex to 10-year-olds? Like, this is end of empire type stuff. And you can't help but sit back and say, no matter what I think, I have failed, you have failed, all of us that have sounded the whistle, that we weren't effective enough, and our country has fallen so deeply, but there is a part of you that says, maybe we do deserve it. Maybe because as a society and as a political movement, we have suffered loss after loss after loss and remained silent because we wanted to remain comfortable. Maybe this is the repercussions, and now sadly, if we don't start fighting more, it's going to be our children. They're the ones that are going to have to right the ship. And I hope not. I hope to do enough that we could steer things back in the right direction now. But yeah, I think you're right. At some point you say, well, do we deserve some of this? I don't know. It's a fair question, I think.
We got hands up, Lilac, and then we'll go to Jamal. Lilac, go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'll make it quick. So one, the reason why our representatives don't give a damn about us is because they're making money off of us. Think about it. They go in there making six figures, and then by the time they're done, they're making the millions. They don't want the gravy train to stop. So, you have that there, and then term limits, just like before, they're going to make too much money off of that. They don't want term limits.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think I think it was Ron Paul did a segment when he talked about term limits. He understood the premise behind it, but even he said it was just like term limits aren't going to change the level of greed that politicians are going to show on the daily. He's like, so you can try and restrict them. You can try and showcase hey, this is the reasoning why we need term limits, but it's not going to change those that are greedy and the reasonings as to why they want to, say, for example, promote big donors, do what they can to help them and achieve their. And it made sense to me, but I still feel like it should be a step in the right direction to limit that. Like I say, you do have someone that is just as greedy, at least rather than having 8-year terms, they have 4. So I get the premise behind it, but I'm still in favor of term limits. Jamal, over to you, sir.
Hey, First Sarge, how y'all doing? I just want to say this. Number one, awesome video you did with the tango and the ghost. It was beautiful. It scared me and was beautiful because y'all kept disappearing in and out. But I want to say this: when it came to President Trump, do y'all remember when John Boehner left office? John Boehner gave Hollywood people. This is John Boehner, Republican. He gave Hollywood people the first 10 million or $1 million break tax breaks. And I'm like, what are you doing? Then in 2013, because that's when my daughter was born, that's when Ted Cruz went to the floor and tried to do Obamacare. Ted Cruz was the only Republican at the time that was really fighting. I got so sick and tired of hearing Republicans tell us we're better than that, we're better than that, we're better than that, while Democrats are kicking us, beating us, doing whatever they wanted to do. And when President Trump came on the scene, President Trump came in saying, okay, I'm gonna fight, which he did. Now in 20 and when it came to the shutdowns, he was wrong. I'm the biggest Trump supporter is, but he was wrong. Was he terrified? Yes. Were America terrified? Yes. But we also saw the media, this lie and not help people. And to me personally, I feel a lot of the people died because of the media told a lie. Because if you remember, it was something out called hydroxychloroquine. There was some representatives that was in Michigan. They were black. They were black Democrat representatives. They took hydroxychloroquine. They got better. But when President Trump started promoting it, they shot it down. They said, "Oh, this is laughable. Oh, this is a joke." And I'm like, "Wow, you people are literally trying to kill people just to get this man out of office." I was at January the 6th. I didn't go inside the building, but I was there. But I tell people, if Joe Biden gets reelected, oh, they're going to finally probably try to lock me up as well, because what they're trying to do with January 6th is presented as it's white supremacy and it's just white people. That's who it was. But the blacks and Hispanics and the Asians like myself who was there, and we was there to support President Trump, I got a visit from the FBI, but that was it. But now we seeing they're locking people up who didn't even go in. So why aren't you doing that to the other people that was there of other ethnic groups? Because they want to push it and make it seem like, oh, it was white supremacy. So when people of color, or I hate saying that because you might as well say color people. When black and Latino folks say, hey, what is going on with President Trump? They want to make like he's racist, blah, 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 and keep going. But yes, I will tell people I hated that he locked down, but people was terrified. If people remember 2020, people was terrified. People didn't know what was going on, but there was some people saying, no, this isn't killing healthy and children, it's killing fat folk. That's who it's killing. It's killing overweight people who need to go hit a gym, go do a push-up, do a sit-up, do a pull-up, go do the old Army standards, 42, 32, 16, 10. Go do it. But nobody was doing anything except they was using it as a dividing wedge, and with dividing wedge to try to get him out. With this thing with Israel and Hamas, I'm noticing the so-called religion of peace. If you say you support Israel, they will attack you. They will talk about raping you. I did a video of me dancing and burning the Palestinian flag. People should
I saw
see
that.
how many times I've been called the N, because I'm trying to get your podcast taken out for Sergeant, the N word, hard R, and I laugh, because I'm black conservative. I'm used to being called that by liberals. But these are the people whom they say are we supposed to have pity for. And I got into a debate. I said, well, in World War II, we bombed Dusseldorf, Berlin, Hamburg. We bombed Japan. We bombed Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Why? Because that's war. Well, that's different. Well, how is it different? That's what you do to win a war. But people be surprised of the craziness that is going on. I'm gonna wrap it up. People be surprised of the craziness that is going on and the depths they will do to try to get an election. And my personal opinion with what they did in 2020, yeah, there was a lot of funny business, but that's all I got to say. Forgive me for going over 3 minutes.
Oh, you're good. I agree. But, at the same time, though, when Trump sits there and says they're going to cheat, they're going to rig this election, and then you sign the CARES Act, which even said mail in balloting is how they're going to cheat, and then you turn around and you support this through legislation and you give it funding. It's like you say one thing, but your actions say something completely different. He talked about that we're not going to do ballot harvesting at first. And it's like, don't you want to win? It's like we have to play by their rules. And that's why I talk about spineless Republicans. I keep seeing that from him. I'm like, dude, we continue to lose. You've got to play. And if it's legal in certain states, then you better be out there ballot harvesting. If you're not, you're just putting yourself in a disadvantage, and your principle is going to make you lose. Now, this isn't the same as, like I said before, Vosh saying by any means necessary, which includes cheating. I'm not saying that. But if the rules is that you can ballot harvest, then you should be ballot harvesting like Scott Presler. I know Rob said you might be able to get him on tomorrow. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But this guy's out there beating the drum. And it's like everything Trump does undermines that guy's work. And it's like, I'm sorry, if you're going to be a leader, then lead effectively, lead to the best method possible. Like, again, we go and we talk about January 6th, and Trump says, we're going to go down there and we're going to protest. And I'm like, fine, that's your right. You have every right to protest. I will not blame Trump for January 6th. I blame him for a lot of things, but he did not say go down there and get violent. When you say go down there and protest, that is 100% legal. And you should not be brought up on charges for that. But the issue is you don't put gasoline next to an open fire. It just breeds the wrong outcome. And that's what Trump did. Nancy Pelosi saw it. And we're talking about in terms of leadership and having enough foresight not to get yourself involved in something that could blow up in your face. What did Trump do? You send 1 million people down there. Granted, under peaceful conditions, but it's already a hostile environment. It's very electric. It's very energetic. And what happened? Pelosi reduced the Capitol Police presence. There was not nearly enough security, and they ushered them in. They walked right into a trap. And it's like, look, anybody of sound mind would say, don't go down there. Stay here and protest. Don't mix it. And that's the problem. I see Trump as not being an effective leader. Strategically, he's not. And again, the mail-in balloting, all of a sudden, mail-in balloting, I feel like he is not the guy that can make smart decisions for the GOP.
I mean, these are fair criticisms. They are. To me, one of the tragedies of the mistakes that Trump made was I felt Trump was the first major politician in my lifetime that, for better or worse, wasn't ideologically grounded. Now, that sounds bad, but that also means that you, as his supporters, have a chance to steer him in a direction you want. You remember, most of Trump voters probably are people that are deeply concerned about violations of the Second Amendment. Trump comes out after the one shooting. He's like, yeah, let's get rid of bump stocks. And then his supporters are like, wait, what? No, right? Like, and then he's like, oh, okay, yeah, protect the Second Amendment. Like, that was because I don't think Trump really cares. Now, I would rather have a president that's doing the right things because they're ideologically grounded in constitutional principles and the ideas of liberty. That's certainly preferable to me. But the next best thing would be someone who just wants to be liked, and we could convince him, hey, this is the direction you should go. That's better than what we generally have. You brought up, Jamal, John Boehner. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a politician that once he was out of office showed more contempt for the very voters that put him into that position. John Boehner hates Republican voters. It oozes from him. I think Trump, one of the things that makes him so popular is there is an authenticity to the fact that he actually likes blue collar people. When he says, hey, you work with your hands, you work on roads, you're a welder, it comes across, maybe he's lying, but to me it comes across as believable. And, I knew people that never voted. My parents never voted their entire lives until Donald Trump, a Manhattan billionaire, right, started running because they felt that no politician in the history of their lives had ever even spoken up about the challenges they face. They're in rural America. They're rednecks. No one cares. It's flyover country. They didn't care. Well, here was this guy that has nothing to do with them as far as the way he lives his life, but he had this charisma. Now, that only takes you so far. You need the policies and things like that to back it up. So I think John's right. But, I'm still going to vote for Trump certainly if he wins the primary. I think, hopefully I'll be able to convince John and the rest of the people in this spaces going forward that'll be the
Snowball's chance in hell, my man. Snowball's chance in hell. And I'm telling you, look, they're already, like, a lot of the MAGA folk are already saying that, I'm voting Don Jr. in 2028. I don't want the Trumps becoming the Kennedys. I don't want the Trumps becoming the Bushes or the Clintons. I am tired of the nepotism in these families that they stick around and all they do is just, basically replicate what their forefathers did or their ancestors, not ancestors. Well, yeah, technically ancestors. And I'm sick of it. If we've seen the Trump presidency for what it is, yes, he's very vivacious. I'll give him that. But there comes a point, though, where it's like, okay, but what have you actually accomplished? I think a lot of conservatives say, well, even my partner, Josh, whom I love, good guy, disagree with him on this, is we had a great economy. It's like, yeah, we did. But then he destroyed it. So it's like, I built this beautiful house for all of you to live in, but now I'm going to burn it down. So what was the point? Now, outside that, I question people. What exactly about Donald Trump is conservative? He's not pro-life. This guy says, yeah, well, a 5-week ban, that's too much. We should talk to liberals. We should negotiate 15 weeks. It's whatever. I'm like, that's a pro-life position. Fiscally, nope. Added 7.8 trillion to the national deficit. Militarily, I'll give him props on that. He didn't get us into any new wars, but that's not really that hard not to do. He appointed some great judges. That's the status quo. But what about Donald Trump is conservative? It's certainly not in the cultural mainstream. He sided with Disney over DeSantis. He promotes the trans agenda. He promotes the Marxist ideology. Granted, I will say it wasn't nearly as bad under Trump as it is under Biden, but that's all because, a Democrat takes off, and that's what's going to become the primary talking point of a lot of things. But if we are talking about voting a representative of the people, by the people, for the people, that is rooted in conservative values, forget Donald Trump's past. Just go by what he's been saying. He is not a conservative. I've said this repeatedly. He is a Clinton-era Democrat. So to bring that back in, to bring in the loyalty of the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I find to be a complete moron, these people, that's what we usher in, and that's why we're going to continue to lose elections. So while you say you're going to vote for Trump if he secures the primary, I'll write in DeSantis, because Trump is going to continue to make the GOP lose. We've got to move beyond this. We've got to have better representation. It is possible. We just got to pick the right people. And I know that's asking a lot, but it is doable. I have faith in people that we can make this happen. I want to see more Thomas Masseys. I want to see more Ron Pauls. I don't want to see any Marco Rubios. I'm tired of seeing this. So I want politicians with actual teeth that will represent actual conservatism. And Rob, while I do agree that, if we're going to say that he's not constitutionally sound, but he will at least sway with what the majority of his people say, you still open yourself up to tyranny by the majority. Republicans don't always get it right. I want a man that is constitutionally sound, that is rooted in principle, because for a long time there, a good vast majority of people were for the lockdowns. Constitutionally, that was not right. I cannot agree with that. I need someone that's going to stand up there, make the hard decisions, take the beatings, and say, look, you might not like me, but this is what our country was built on. I will adhere to this until my death. And if you don't like that, don't vote me back in. I don't feel like that was Donald Trump. I don't think, I don't think he's the best candidate. I do feel Ron DeSantis is the better candidate. Above all, I think, Ron Paul or Mass would be even better than that, but those aren't the choices we have right now. So I cannot subscribe to the idea of, if Trump wins it, now, because then I feel like you're just voting for another Biden Democrat at that point. Maybe not nearly as bad, but certainly not any better.
But you are voting, in effect, for a Biden Democrat if you don't vote for Trump. I mean, it's certainly, you're 100% guaranteed.
What did we get from Trump's term? What do we get from his term?
Well, I thought
it's the same.
No, it's not, right? Like, and I think that let me make it as clear as I can. Jamal said he was there on January 6th, and I assume he's a great patriot and assume he committed no crime like many of the people that have been locked up, right? Do you think Jamal's chances of being locked up increase if Trump's in office or decrease as opposed to Joe Biden? I would say that it massively.
Honestly,
if Joe Biden's
probably increase, yeah. I'll give you that.
I think that if Joe Biden's in office, the tyranny we've seen inflicted against people that are in the conservative side will increase tenfold. I think that this is a turning point in our country in the sense that if we are willing to accept the authoritarianism we've seen, the weaponization of the FBI, the blatant double standards, the using the FBI to protect Democrats, to protect the Biden crime.
But Rob, he supported the FBI. Rob, you talk about Jamal on January 6th. Trump was the causation of January 6th. Now, again, I'm not blaming him for that. I don't think that was his fault. But strategically, it was a stupid move to make. So the references you just gave me, the causation was Trump himself. So again, explain to me, how was that different than Biden?
Because there's a difference between screwing up because of incompetence, let's say, versus the intent. So, for example, Trump screws up.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. I will give you that. Fair enough.
So what I'm saying is this, that if you say, Like, your goal is to get someone like Ron DeSantis in. We could talk about in a second whether or not that's a good idea, right? But if your goal is to get Ron DeSantis in, I don't think a 2024 Trump presidency precludes a 2028 DeSantis presidency, right? And what we're talking about is the theoretical situation where Trump wins the primary. All of your arguments are reasons that you would have and many people would have to prefer DeSantis in the primary. That's completely reasonable. I don't have a reason to, completely reasonable position. If he loses, though, and you say, I'm not going to vote for Trump, I'm going to write in DeSantis, which is just basically throwing the vote away, and enough people do that, then we definitely get a Biden or Newsom presidency. That's what we'll end up with. And that's going to be the green light to them that they could increase the intensity in all these authoritarian pressures. I think that makes it less likely that we have a 2028 DeSantis presidency than if Trump wins in 2024. So, like, the idea that you're like, well, I'm rejecting
See,
Trump.
I disagree with that, though. The reason I disagree with that, though, is because if we do get, say, for example, we do get another 4 years of Biden, which I don't think it'll be Biden. I think it will be Newsom. Not that it makes it any better. But at the same time, this is it for Trump. I have to add this caveat in here. This is it for Trump. If he does not win this one, he's done. He's not going to run again. Now, what you just said as far as the likelihood of a 28 DeSantis thing, I think that actually increases that. Now, I think we framed this around the idea of we want to get the best possible outcome now. I'm not. I'm saying that if we get 4 more years of Democrat control, hopefully by then, and I really feel this is true, the GOP would eventually figure it out and enough to unite and say, look, we better figure this out. Let's back the Sanders. Let's back somebody. But right now, we are so fractured, and we don't have a leader of the GOP like Donald Trump to unite us. That is the biggest thing I'm seeing right here. I get your argument. I understand it. I don't want a Biden presidency. I don't want a Newsom presidency. It's going to be horrific and disastrous for us. But right now, I think in fact, it does the exact opposite. It ushers in more Trumpian politicians that are going to lose more elections. And I see your points. I have to disagree, Adam. I think 2028 should be the focal point if Trump does secure the general. Because let's say Trump does secure the general election. Do you think he's going to flip Arizona and Georgia back? He lost them. I think he will lose. I think he will lose hands down.
Well, he'll certainly lose if people that prefer DeSantis choose not to vote for him. And this is the same problem. Like, I've had this argument.
Well, I'm French. Let me first. I'm French, dude. I don't think a lot of people are going to adopt my stances on this one. I think I'm kind of like one of the very few. And I'm not advocating for people not to vote or to vote, right in. I'm just saying that's what I would do. But let's just say that I would vote Trump in the general. Let's say most people would. Do you think that changes the outcome of him potentially losing to Biden or Newsom?
No, I think that both DeSantis and Trump will lose, if I'm completely honest, because I think that we've already talked about the potential things that the Democrats will be willing to do, the crises that we see coming, the sexual assault allegations that we'll see coming. And don't get it twisted, they would come to DeSantis.
They'll do that to anybody.
Right.
Yeah,
so I think, and the control of social media, the control of our mainstream media, I think that it's going to be a really huge, and I think that in general, I'm not blaming DeSantis for this. I'm not blaming Trump for this, though both would incur some sort of blame once they're the candidate. I think the head of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, is one of the most feckless, corrupt, worthless people out there. She is absolutely despicable. Like, what is she doing to encourage,
fully agree.
You mentioned this point about what a huge mistake it was for Trump to say not to endorse mail-in ballot. Completely agree with you. I disagree with mail-in ballots in the sense that the legality that we've now been presented, particularly in my state of Pennsylvania. But once it's there, you have to take advantage. This is the metaphor I use. Imagine you're playing in professional football before the forward pass was legal. And then you're a team and you're doing really good. You're just handing the ball off every time. And then the league says, hey, this year we're going to allow the forward pass. But you're like, well, we're not going to get a quarterback that could throw the ball forward. We're just going to keep running because we don't agree with the fact that this should be legal. And then you lose every game. And then the next year you lose every game. And you just keep complaining. Well, we don't think the pass should be legal. That's fine. You could complain and you could try to lobby to get the rules switched back. But you have to take advantage of the rules once they're there. It's the same with mail-in balloting. You have to take advantage. What is Ronna McDaniel doing? Like, I look at my state of Pennsylvania. It's a swing state. I'm not kidding you, John, when I tell you this. And people that watch my show all the time will know that it's an issue that I've been talking about since the day of the 2022 election. They got hammered. They got shellacked, the GOP in Pennsylvania in 2022. They literally lost to a human vegetable in John Fetterman. The worst debate performance I've ever seen. Fetterman wins. They win the governorship. They win the senatorship, right? They win senator. We have another senator race coming up in 2024. You know what changes the Pennsylvania GOP have made? Nothing. No one lost their job. No changes to mobilizing people to do mail-in ballots. They literally put the same candidate up that lost by 1% to Dr. Oz, Dave McCormick. Same people, same plan that lost to John Fetterman. Ronna McDaniel at the national level at the RNC. What significant changes have the RNC made since they've underperformed in 2022? Nothing. So I think the idea of any Republican winning the presidency, when you factor in the corruption, the scandals that are likely to be brought forward, the institutions being controlled by the establishment left, I think that it's going to be an uphill battle. Nonetheless, the only chance we have, and let me switch this criticism a little. As much as I may criticize you, John, or other people that are in this space that say, if Trump's the nominee, I won't vote for him, the problem's worse in the inverse. There are an awful lot of Trump supporters that hate DeSantis so much that if DeSantis is the nominee, they won't vote for him. That's stupid. That's especially stupid if you're a Trump supporter, because if Joe Biden wins, Trump may spend the rest of his life in prison. At least under DeSantis.
But Rob, what started this rift? I agree with you. It's just as equally stupid. But what started this rift? People's voter base usually take on the personality of the person that they are actually going to vote for. Trump does this. And at first, it really resonated with a lot of people, myself included. I won't lie about that. Trump's ability to talk about, like, you would be in jail was incredible. We love this because we hated the left. And I wouldn't say he pandered, but he spoke the language of the American people, and we rallied behind him for that. But then we started to notice a trend. It didn't stop. It didn't stop, and it kept going. Divide, divide, divide. Now, and I've said this so many times, DeSantis would not be anywhere near where he's at right now if Trump wouldn't even have acknowledged him. DeSantis would be dead in the water. Instead, Trump initially, right before he went after DeSantis, hard. Accusations of pedophilia, all manner of disgusting things. That's the kind of campaign Donald Trump was going to run. Donald Trump is dividing this party. I'm sorry, I cannot attribute, and I try to be fair, Rob. I try to be as intellectually honest and good faith as I can. It was not DeSantis that caused this rift. And this idea of DeSantis should have been loyal to Trump, we literally had an American revolution over loyalty to the crown, loyalty to a politician. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Every man or woman that is an American over the age of 35 has every right to run for presidency. There is no loyalty. No politician deserves loyalty by any stretch of the imagination. They should be loyal to the people. So again, in regards of the blunders you talk about Trump has made, mail-in balloting in Pennsylvania, Trump has helped further that cause as far as their ability to cheat. He is not a leader that's going to maximize or be effective at these tactics. That's what I'm trying to say here. So you can vote for him. You can say that Magadonians that say they won't vote for DeSantis are just as stupid as people like me that say DeSantis, won't vote for Trump. But who caused this? This is not a leader. This is not someone that's going to unite the GOP. That's what we need to have. And if you put a side-by-side of DeSantis versus Trump, I got to go with DeSantis. This guy has military experience. He knows what it means to be a leader. I'm not going to sit there and simp for the dude and say, like, oh, he's going to cure cancer and fix this world. But when posed with these two different possible outcomes, I got to go with DeSantis. I don't see Trump as a record of his action, not his word, his action, as being a leader that's actually going to beat the left. You yourself said this as far as the mail-in ballots and stuff.
Well, yeah, but I'm not trying to convince you to pick Trump over DeSantis. I'm saying once the primary is over, at that point, if your decision is between Trump or voting third party or writing someone in, thereby, if enough people do that, assuring a Biden presidency, I think that you should think that with all of its faults, a Trump presidency is better than a Biden presidency. And if your rationale, if the main thing you're looking at is like, let me see if I'm characterizing you correctly if I say this.
Hold on. You already misquoted it. I am not saying a Biden presidency would be better than a Trump. Clearly a Trump presidency would be better. What I'm saying, though, in the long haul, that would be better for the GOP because I don't think Trump is going to beat Biden. And that being said, we have to look to 2028. I know people don't want to do that, but right now, that's my biggest thing. Because I just don't feel like Trump's going to win.
Okay.
If he secures this nomination, the primary. So again, don't conflate me saying.
You're right. I got you.
I'm not. Yeah.
What I mean by that, and we all have our goal. Like, we all have our big reason that we're voting. Maybe your reason is you want a return to constitutional principles. Maybe your reason is I want the GOP or a party, whatever party that would be, set up to defend the Constitution, not just in one election. And that seems to be what you're saying. You're saying, I'm less concerned. If I think that winning this election and getting a feckless leader like Donald Trump in 2024 that would be better in general than Joe Biden. However, your ultimate goal of having leadership that represents the people that would be constitutionally principled, that would decline if you had Trump in there in 2024, because then we would get more Trumpian people in 2028. Is that a fair?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, very fair. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want any Marjorie Taylor Greens. I don't want any more Trump loyalists. I want constitutional loyalists, and that means, because again, Trump takes that presidency, we usher in more of these politicians that kiss the ring, bend the knee to Trump. That's why we have a fractured party right now. That's why even in the House we could not unite, and Trump is one of the biggest causations for that.
Well, I agree that Trump's a divisive person, and I agree with you that it's like, look, I like how Trump talks sometimes, but it has to be the right target. Like, and just stylistically as well, right? Like, let's take two people I don't like, or two groups. I don't like the mainstream media. The mainstream media is powerful. I don't have a problem Trump being divisive to them, saying they're the enemy of the people. Agreed. However, I don't like Rosie O'Donnell. Do I think the president of the United States should be using his platform to be like, Rosie O'Donnell's fat, she's stupid? Like, no, that's dumb. That didn't offend me. It wasn't like a big issue. But in general, and that's like in general the problem. It's the same's true here. Trump has an inability to he just looks as people as like, either you're his ally, or if you're any impediment to him, even if you agree with him 90%, you're the enemy, right? And he's this like brash. Yeah, and I'm not saying this to defend him. This is just what I believe about him. He's like this real estate mogul, and I think he's the type of dude that could sue John Burk and be like, I'm suing you for infringement. I think Shell Shock's infringing on, and sue you and go to court for 2 weeks and try to ruin you, and then the next week be like, John, come over to my house. I want to talk about a business deal. Let's go out for pizza. Like, he just looks at everything as business. Like, he'll sit there and insult Ted Cruz's wife in the 2016 election, and then 2 months later, him and Ted Cruz are boys. But that's not because Donald Trump was contrite. That's because Ted Cruz was like, look, this guy's a bull in a china shop. And if I want to get shit done, then I got to be like, okay, I'll work with him. And that's a flaw of Trump. It's beneficial. It's helpful when he's targeting the people you don't like, right? But when he's targeting people that are good people, that are principled people that either are running against him or just have slight differences. I mean, he did the same stuff with like Rand Paul, when Rand Paul would be like, yeah, I'm not going to vote for this bill, the CARES Act and stuff. And Massey, like, Trump was shitting on them. Right? No, you got to vote for this bill. You got to sign it. That's terrible, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, you have to take the good with the bad, right? And I think that if we're just looking at it in your goal of to set the Republican Party up for more constitutional people, because the fear I have is the current Trump is right to be divisive to the Republican Party in this sense, because the traditional leadership of the Republican Party, the Mitch McConnells, etc., they need to go. They don't represent the will of the people. Paul Ryan didn't, John Boehner didn't, George Bush didn't. I think that the Republican Party has been led by people that don't care what their constituents are. And so for someone to fracture that and bring in a more populist type of conservatism, I think is a good thing. The problem is he directs it at people that I think are arguably also populist conservatives, like Ron DeSantis, like Massey, right? And I think that's a huge mistake, right? But I think if we look at it in the goal of how do we get more of those populist type people, I don't think if Trump would win in 2024, if he wins the general election, that makes it less likely that we get an articulate person who's also advocating for the will of the people, but actually has more of an ideological mindset, like a Ron DeSantis or other people like that. I think it paves the way for them, because Trump, there's no one as Trumpian as Trump. So if Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, says, well, I'm going to run in 2028 and I'm like Trump, she'd get crushed by DeSantis, because what's keeping Trump afloat is he was a unique guy in a unique situation. He's one of a kind. He has this charisma. He has these people that will follow him to their detriment, no matter what he says. So I think if Trump wins in 2024, it sets the table for 2028 if Don Jr. wants to run or something like that versus a DeSantis. I think DeSantis and people like him will be in a fantastic position. I think if Trump loses the general, what you'll see is a turn from the Trumpian type politics to the Nikki Haley type politics. I think the Republican Party will say we need to go back to the Bush style. We need to go back to the Paul Ryan style. And that's where you'll see the movement. And I think people like DeSantis will get lost in the shuffle. That will say, they'll say,
I don't know, man. I see your point there, but I kind of feel like you're also referencing that older generation to the boomer crowd when you've got the millennials and Gen Xers taking over now. And I don't think those types of politicians are as prevalent or as popular anymore now that we've seen this global war on terror escalate and then finally come to an end. And we've seen the cost it's had on us now. We see, in a clear light now what Bush did, what Paul Ryan's supported and promoted. I don't know. You do make a good point there that I think it does open the door for Republicans to say, well, how do we actually win? It was with the neocons. I just don't know if the newer generations would stand behind something like that, because I do feel like more modern GOPers have become a little bit more progressive in culture as far as taking on libertarian stances on that one. So I don't know, man. I mean, you do make a good point there. I just don't know if I agree, but I'm not going to say that I'm right on that because I don't know. I really don't know on that.
And
That's a very good point.
Let me add this other part. So then you also have, okay, if Trump doesn't win the general, what does that mean for another 4 years of Biden presidency? More seats on the Supreme Court or packing the court? More FBI targeting parents at school board meetings? Joe Biden's team just announced that they're now going to put regulations on AI. The AI has to go through sort of the executive for them to basically control over what AI says. You'll see more collaboration with places like Google that control algorithms. I think that a Biden presidency, if they get the signal to go even further, if he wins in 2024, to target people that they dislike, to use these institutions even more, I don't know that we ever recover. I don't know that it will ever be a two-party system again. The best you'll have are Republicans that basically, like your Adam Kissinger type people, that will be the opposition. Basically just Republicans in name only that are just your Mitch McConnells that are there and say, yeah, Ukraine, yeah, Israel, let's send all that stuff. But we slightly disagree on abortion, but they'll agree on everything else. And we will be further censored, and people like Jamal there will be further attacked because he'll be demonized as one of those evil people that were there January 6th that are really just patriots that rightfully were concerned with the direction they saw this country going. So I think that if you're fighting for 2020, if DeSantis loses and you're fighting for 2028 and you're saying, okay, 2024 is a rush because I think even if Trump wins, he'll screw the pooch, he'll screw everything up, he's not going to do anything to fight this corruption, you may totally be right. But I think that if he doesn't win and it's the alternative, that for the two reasons I said, that you'll have a bunch of people in the Republican Party, the Nikki Haley wing that's going to say, oh, we got to go to her. We need more of a traditional sort of, defend Israel, more of that sort of politician than a DeSantis. And DeSantis, make no mistake about it, if Trump loses the general, people will blame DeSantis for that. Right, which is stupid, but that's what'll happen.
I completely disagree. I'd love to jump in at some point, John. I know I don't have my hand up, and there's other hands, but I completely disagree with that.
All right, let me get to the hands. We'll open this up for debate. I know Lilac had her hand up, and then we'll go to Jamal, then over to you. Go ahead, Lilac.
Okay, so obviously I really do not know who I'm going to go for yet, whether it be DeSantis or Trump. What I'm going to do, this is just me personally, whoever gets the main, so whoever it is between DeSantis and Trump, I'm going to go for whoever is the person, obviously, because I don't want to, for lack of better words, write in, one person I want, and then that vote's just, well, in my opinion, wasted. So, but, no, I agree that I hate to say this, and this is going to be so controversial because I don't know exactly who to pick, but I can honestly say that there has been a lot of stuff that Trump has said that I do not agree with, which is kind of pushing me towards DeSantis. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, I don't know how it would be as a president under DeSantis. I don't know how he would be because I haven't experienced that, so I want to give him a try. But I already know that under Trump, my gas wasn't expensive. I was able to live to get the groceries I could without spending two paychecks, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. Let's go over to Jamal.
John, I gotta let you know. I gotta leave in 5 minutes, if that's okay, John.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, well, absolutely. Jamal, go ahead, sir.
Okay, first off, I'm gonna make this quick. In 2015 and 2016 election, I remember a lot of people were saying that about the Trump cruise. There was a Trump cruise, and I made this scenario because originally I was cruising with Cruz until I heard Donald Trump in the debate.
I unfortunately have to go, so I apologize to John and everyone. But I got some family obligations today, and this was impromptu. So I hope John forgives me. I hope you all forgive me. But yeah, obviously I completely disagree. I think that either Trump supporters or DeSantis supporters that are like, if the opposite guy wins the primary, I'm not going to vote for him, I think is a huge mistake. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Oops, didn't mean to do that so quick. We'll talk to you all soon. I'll be there 11 a.m.